This is That One Audition with Alyshia Ochse. Welcome to That One Audition with Alyshia Ochse. I am an actress, host of this show. I created this show because I wanted to get behind the scenes and talk to actors about their process, their audition stories, and how they survived this industry. Today, we're talking to Rosal Colon. You know her from Orange is the New Black, Power Book 3, and so much more. Today, we talk about the humanity and getting to the depths of characters. And don't mind our look, because sometimes when you don't feel good, the show must go on. Let's get to it.
Yes, Rosal. We were just talking about this off mic, but having Puerto Rican roots and what we were just talking about, growing up and wanting to see yourself reflected in stories, in television, in movie, even in theater. And you have this beautiful theater family background. So I'm so curious when your family started to take up space and be like, I want to be included in telling the story. How did that start?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to share in this space with you. I personally just like I thrive. I feel seen. I feel when I'm at my lowest, I feel like uplifted when I listen to other actors' journeys. I mean, it's we're warriors, man. So to hear the hard stuff, that people go through, it reminds you that like you're not alone and there's no linear path here.
Yeah.
So my parents came to the States in the early 70s, and neither of them from remotely at all artistic backgrounds in Puerto Rico. But they met here in New York, and my mother at a very early age was just very hyper aware. At that point, there was a really strong Puerto Rican and New Yorican presence in New York City, particularly in the South Bronx. And she herself always envisioned herself as an artist. And she was just seeing an imbalance of the way that, like, she felt like the only people that actually had access to go see a Broadway show or to go see a theater, go see a play rather, were typically not the people that looked like her. Um, and she felt like it was her charge to create a theater company in the South Bronx for the community that told our stories, Afro-Caribbean folklore, through drama, through music, performance, and art.
You're raised in this. So you're raised in the building of this. So then I want to ask, since you're being raised in this, are you not seeing the discrepancies? Because she is building a foundation for you to be seen. She's building a foundation for your stories to be told. So did you automatically feel celebrated? Because I know then you go on to LaGuardia High School, like your education is centered around telling stories now. And then you come out and you're doing Broadway left and right. So were you not then filled with that void of wanting to see yourself because you're getting supported by your mother to see yourself?
I've actually never been asked that, and that's opening up a whole other the crazy thing is I grew up in this bubble, right? Like this theater company first started off in the gym of a church in the South Bronx in one of the most dangerous areas. And that's where she was like, this is where we're keeping it because this is our people and they need to see themselves. So I was like, I mean, her water broke in performance, by the way. She was doing a show.
Chills. I think you're the first person I've ever interviewed that was birthed literally almost on stage.
Yeah. So that's wild. And the thing is that bubble, I did not grow up with. I said none of my family was a silver spoon with any kind of like real crazy financial means. You know what I mean? So, but my life was literally at that point when it was in the gym of the church, it was just in rehearsal all day, watching the collective come together, come up with ideas, come up with a rhythm, come up with a story. And all of these stories too have a lot of political and social history attached to them so that we teach our future generations about our culture so that we keep it alive. But that being said, the moment that I'm no longer in the theater and I'm like immersed in just like regular school and the city life, I absolutely felt like an outsider, like 100%. I felt like I was living these like living in these two opposite worlds, even when I was in theater school, which is fucking wild. But I just felt like it was my first reality check as to like, oh, I'm the one of three Latinas in a room full of that. And all of my teachers are white for the most part. And the canon that we're being taught, while I fully appreciate it and it's wonderful, I was like, I don't like, my brain is not connecting to like this Neil Simon moment and like, what is that about? And just a constant, that term, which I like just learned, but like the constant code switching. And I do think like some kind of like identity crisis about like who am I in this landscape? Because I felt so seen without having to explain myself within the culture of the company that they created. But then I'm like, there's this whole other world that I want to be a part of, but I don't feel like I'm understood as I am. I think I was always really keenly aware of the stereotype of what Latina was, especially then in like the 90s and early 2000s, and specifically the stereotype of what a New Yorican woman is, which is just, I mean, I grew up in New York, born and raised, but I never quite felt like the other kids that were born and raised here because my family made such a concerted effort. People would joke when they would come to my parents' apartment, it's like little Puerto Rico. They made such a concerted effort that Spanish be my first language because I'm automatically going to learn English no matter what. And that Puerto Rican island culture was what I knew more Puerto Rican New York culture, which I know now I'm so grateful for because I know that it gives me so much colors, so many, like a palette to work with, you know?
Absolutely. Depth in the history inside of you so that you were walking within, not walking without. And I'm so curious then, going to school, and then did you end up having a lot of the schools, they end up having the conservatory, right, where all the agents and everybody comes in, and was that something that went well for you as far as being scouted and then getting somebody to help you then find roles for you to start auditioning for? Or were you how did that whole process go from you going to school, kind of working out in the world now outside of your bubble, and then did you go back to the bubble after school, or was like, yeah, no, I'm going to try and push my way into being seen?
Yeah, I think so. Before the thought of TV and film ever entering my space, I viewed the art form of theater as royalty. Like that to me was seeing a collective of people put together a piece of work and then tell that story in front of an audience. To me, that was like, and it still is, but that's like that was the goal. That was the one and only goal. So there's this thing of like when you're studying Chekhov and Shakespeare, and again, this is a different time, however many years ago, I want to say, at least when I was in Purchase and like between 2004 and 2008, I was not aware of what was going to happen outside. I was like, I'm a Chekhovian actress. Like I can do this. I can do Tennessee Williams. I want to play Martha. Right? And Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Like I didn't see the limitation for myself at all. And I think the kinds of choices that I made, I would imagine in particular for like my showcase, if I had gone maybe the this, that, and the other route, maybe I would have gotten a little more representation. But my brain didn't even think to do that. My brain was like, I'm going to show that like I can do magical realism, that this is the work that moves me, that I'm drawn to depth and nuance and range. And so I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I did get representation out of it.
But was it
And
mostly was it for television and film? Was it just for theater? Yeah. Okay. That's what I was wondering. Because like
mainly,
you just said, you can you can be in this world. You are this Shakespearean actor. You are able to bring depth and breadth and time to build this world, to build these characters. And then you're shot into, if you're going into television and film, here's a quick turnaround. Here's a one-dimensional character, like you said, like the audience can't see the movements but you're making, but you know, using your body and being a little bit more sassy, or like what the, you know, television and film deems as like this Puerto Rican, a Latino vibe, this idea, right? Playing out an idea where you have this rich history in relationship now to text and to basically poetry, plays. You're not going to be utilized to the best of your ability, right? And then how do you bridge those things where you're like, no, wait, I am really skilled and you want to see this? So I was, you know, that's where I really was curious about the typecasting and how you get out of that, which I love. Then you're like, I'll just stay right here in theater, which is the goal.
right. I think I love this conversation because it's a lot more complicated than I have ever really given credence to. Um, I realized like I was not, first of all, I wasn't understanding the technical aspect of auditioning for camera, which was something that we were taught towards like the very end of our senior semester, but I wasn't taking any of that seriously because in my brain, I was just like, I'm just going to do theater all over the country and I'm just going to do theater and that's it. And like, if I book something, I book something. But so there was that was like an impediment at first for me. But then it was also feeling disheartened at seeing the things that I was going in for and the things that I was wanting to be seen for, which were, like you said, just such one-dimensional tropes. And it's like I don't, this is not the woman that I know growing up. This is an idea of the woman that I know growing up. And if we're gonna do that person, it's lacking integrity on the page. So there was a period there, whereas now I feel a lot more empowered, but there was a period there where I was kind of not showing up at my fullest self because I was saying yes to these things, but I wasn't really in it. I was playing at it. So I felt really out of the game. Um, I also feel too, like when it comes to, which is another thing that I'm super passionate about, I'm sure someone will listen and relate to, but body types in terms as far as women go in the business, and for men too. It's such a cruel, can be such a cruel world when you are not fitting a certain physical mold, whether it's like super Eurocentric features and size, and that.
Nor should
And
you be. Like, where did we even get this prototype, right? Where like, this is the idea of beauty. This is the idea of size that you need to be. It's like, women, can you get smaller? Can you get smaller? Can you take up less space? Less space?
space. And then what happens is that I realize too, and this is a journey that I'm slowly kind of opening the doors into thanks to therapy and life experience. But I realized like I was shrinking my talent and my spirit trying to fit into the size 2 character versus bringing every inch of who I am into the room. And it's wild when you experience both, because I've also now experienced when I'm like, I'm coming in as my full self and I'm not going to try to do just for this one tape, and it takes so much fucking work, but for this one tape, like I'm not going to try to be what I think they want.
Yep.
I'm not going to try to suddenly channel a supermodel for this character. I'm going to bring what I have, because what I have, they might not have.
I love this. Can you speak on this more, like through auditions? Like, I'm really your audition process for theater, because you did work so much in the theater before television and film plucked you. So how was your audition process in theater? Were you able to see representation because you worked a bunch? Or was that, like you said, it's theater, so I can bring you everything right here. I'm going to take up space on this stage. I'm curious your audition process right out of school having such a foundation of the bubble of the education, and like you said, the confidence of knowing what you could handle. When you were having theater auditions, were you finding that discrepancy of what they wanted you to be there, or was it just once you went into television and film?
It was film and television where I then felt like I had multiple personalities, where I was like,
Yeah.
I'm a theater actress, and then this other landscape is one that I don't belong in. I am not a TV and film actress. I'm a theater actress. And that's something that, like, I think is bullshit and a mind fuck. If you're an artist, you're a fucking artist. You know what I mean? Like, that is who you are. And that takes up so many different avenues and so much space. And I just think it's this like fucked up indoctrination that unfortunately we get like brainwashed with from a very young age. This business will do that. And so my theater auditions, I was like, holy shit, God, I wish, man, if I would go into those film and TV auditions with that same confidence.
I want to hear it. I want to hear any audition story that you have from theater where you, because I think a lot of people write in and they really want to know the difference in the audition process and how they can enhance their audition process. So anything that you're willing to share from the theater background. I audition mostly television and film. So I'm curious how you conducted yourself in those audition processes that landed you role after role. I mean, look at some of the, I'm just going through so much.
Thank you. I feel with theater, I mean, I just, for me, I always connect so much to humanity. That's a very broad way of putting it, but the thing that hooks me into a character is like understanding who this person is and where they're coming from, what their center is, where their heart is. And I can like, I enjoy that process of finding my way in there, for both theater.
Well, but I also, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm making presumptions here. With theater, when you have an audition, to me, it feels like it might be more of a collaborative process because you're going to find the character in the rehearsal, right? You're going to find so much more. You have weeks of rehearsal to really collectively collaborate and bring the story to life. Whereas for television and film, you might get a 24-hour turnaround and now it's self-tape. You don't get to discover the audition process being collaborative. It's like, here's my take. And that's it. And it doesn't get to be judged. Like Patricia Arquette said it once really beautifully. She's like, when I go into an audition room, I don't know what my character is yet. I don't know what my choices are yet. I'm still discovering. And this is my discovery. Can we discover together? And I was like, oh God, if television can film it like that.
Oh my God. Well, that's so liberating because that's exactly how I feel with these tapes. I'm trying to find that. I have found some really beautiful moments, and I also recognize when I am not allowing myself the luxury of having whatever time I have at home and like being in my underwear and like looking at shit and not having to stress about getting on a train to go anywhere. But like allowing myself the time to like almost give that same preparation to a theater audition to a self-tape.
Okay, so in the theater audition, oh, I love this. Walk me through, okay, here comes this audition. And it's like anything. We could go between Riverside and Crazy, any of these. How much time do you actually have to prepare? How do you attack the text? And then how do you actually, when you go in the room, are you having, because you have so much confidence in these theater auditions, are you having a collaborative conversation with the director? How are you maintaining that confidence in the space to constructively give an opinion of what you want in the character, but leave it so open to be really massaged and judged through the rehearsal process?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, let me reiterate, I'm not super confident in all of them, but definitely the ones that I have booked, I accredit to having that confidence, even if I wasn't fully sure about what the story was. Some of these plays are really complicated, or if it's Shakespeare, not really considering myself like adept at Shakespeare, but knowing that there's something in me that can do it. I personally, I like to be as prepared as possible. The turnaround is usually much longer for theater. I haven't been in a theater audition in so many years, I feel like, since before the pandemic.
Yeah.
But at least then, you know, the turnaround is much more significant than like a 10-page
Mhm.
self or in person, right? The next day.
Right.
So I do try, I mean, for me, and it's such a technical thing, and every actor is different. I will always have the page in the hand, but really feeling super comfortable with the text so that I'm not thinking about my line. I'm just living in the moment and with my scene partner, which will be my reader, be it a reader or the casting director. And I think what I do appreciate about those auditions, which is the tricky thing with self tapes, is like I do appreciate that feedback on the spot.
Mhm.
Definitely go in ready and aware and leaving an opening on some cellular level for that to happen so that it doesn't throw me off.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
So going from that practice, and are you in your theater auditions prior to working a lot in television and film, are you becoming more collaborative in the room, asking questions, very malleable for the feedback, like you were saying about the direction? But you're in there probably longer, I would assume, right? You know how to work a stage. You grew up in this bubble. This is your bubble.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's so crazy because I typically, uh, unless I'm unclear about an actual plot point or circumstantial thing in the text, I typically don't really have a question. Like I'd rather just do
Do.
it,
Mhm.
and you know, then we can discuss. Then they can say, well, actually, you know, let's try it this way or let's try it the other way. And um the questions usually come up if there's just a lack of clarity,
Yeah. Okay.
very technical text things.
Well, at this point, you have your 10,000 hours. Like I love the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours practice, right? So you are grown up in the bubble of theater. So you are constantly inundated, right? With history, with human condition, understanding human behavior, analyzing human behavior. Then you go to school, you're getting those hours. Now you're doing theater. So you're on stage
Mhm.
nightly, weekly, you're auditioning constantly. I would love to know your transition into television and film, specifically Orange is the New Black, because the fact that you joined in the fourth season, right? Fourth season. So you know what it is versus a lot of my girlfriends that audition first season when they're like, I'm doing this audition for a web series. And
Yeah, yeah.
we've had some amazing people on the podcast from Orange is the New Black that were on first season when they were like, Connie, I love Connie Schulman. She was like, I didn't know what this was. I went, I got it. And then I'm trying to dress for something else. They're like, no, honey, you're in a prison. She's like, oh, I am. You know, the ignorance is bliss to a certain degree. Now, when you know what it is, I would love to be walked through that process of your creation of the character, of your turnaround to go into it, how this even came to be for you, because here we have, like we talked about at the beginning, representation or lack thereof. And here comes this amazing show that brings representation to the forefront, but doesn't make it about representation. And the wealth and goodness available just for women in general in that show. Oh,
No, it's oh my God. Well, I'd only done one other TV gig prior, which I think is the beautiful thing about that show. And I think them possibly being very intentional about having that variety of casting. But I'd done one episode of Law and Order. Thank you, Law and Order. But it was
thank
like
you,
the
New York. Hey, you're an actor if you've done Law and Order. Here we go, right?
totally. And I checked my box of playing the widowed, mourning, scared, frightened Guadalupe, wherever she was from, 5 lines, whatever. Thank you, Law and Order.
But
'Cause
also, I'm assuming typecast too, because here's a short scene, like you just said. I had to be specific to this.
totally. But I'm actually sometimes the low stakes first gig is probably great because I learned basically all the terms in that like 2 days of shooting.
You mean all
Like
the technical terms, the
all
like, shots?
like I was like soaking everything up and it just and I remember, sorry, and this will lead into the next, but I remember Ice T was in that episode and we were in between takes and he said, It's like, kid, it's like, what do you say? You gotta stay ready. That way you never have to get ready, which I'm sure, we've heard a lot, but that after that gig, it made me realize, like, if this is something that you want to do, you gotta like sharpen your teeth and your skill set and recognize that, like, it's not that you're new to being an artist, it's just that you're new to this technical medium.
Yes. And I love that you said technical, because it is more technical. And even today, actors, you cannot lack the technicality anymore. It's been so ingrained now in our process, whereas before you could arrive on set and they were more cautious with you, or they were more graceful with you, if they believed you could do it too, right? So then you can be a little fly on the wall. Now the technicalities of self-tape and stuff, a lot of actors are balking against it, but it prepares you to be on set. Your relationship with camera is now starting to be practiced at home. How close am I? Can I use this frame? Can you hear me? What's my lighting look like? You're responsible for all of it, but it makes you a better actor on the day. It makes you more responsible on set to be able to be more efficient with
More beautifully said, more efficient, and it can only empower you. Like, the knowledge is power, and that's something that I'm really leaning into. I think there would a part of what I've been working on more diligently, and then we'll get into Orange, but is to, like, not, like you said, skimp out on the little details. Like, get this frame just right. Really break this story down beat by beat. Let's not start at the end and the beginning. Like, what is the arc? Where are you coming from? What's your relationship to your reader? Like, what's to your scene partner? What's the tone of this show? Like, a lot of the times I would just, out of fear, straight up out of fear, I would just, let me just do it. Let me just get it done and do it. And you take yourself out of the running, just like,
we're not able to, our self-tapes now are the language to the producers, directors, and casting, that they can put you on set, that they can trust you. It's just your professionalism. You being able to work a frame just tells them, oh gosh, I can trust them to hit their mark. You knowing that they need to see your eyes. Oh, wow. They understand their relationship with camera now. Being able to almost, that's our calling card now, where we used to be able to go in the room and win the role because they're like, I just like Rosal. She's so talented. We'll get the tech. We'll get the tech.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. We'll figure that out later. She's been working forever. I trust her. I love this character on here. We don't get that anymore.
No.
We just don't. So, okay. So you do Law and Order. You got Ice-T. How long before Jen Houston calls you in for, is Jen casting it for a season, or is it somebody else?
I went in for that first season. I went in for 3 different roles for the series roles the first season. I went in every season.
Who'd you go in for?
I went in for Daya, I went in for Marie, and I went in for, there was another one, I can't remember.
I love this. I love the laying the tracks for this, because that's the other thing too. It might be your 17th audition before NCIS LA is like, okay, we trust you, or this is the right part for you. Now we found it, right? Because they were trying to find something for you.
Yeah, which I now I realize, like, I have to be really diligent about not taking for granted getting called in multiple times by a specific office, even if you don't book each job that they bring you in for. There's such a bigger story behind that. And it's just like a reminder that, like, they want you. They just have to find the right puzzle to piece you into.
Oh, but also, can we talk for a second? Actor to actor, you audition for the first season, multiple roles, series regular. Then the show comes out and is the mega hit.
Well, even so, at this point, I'm doing a play with, and she's just now become like my sister. I'm doing this play off Broadway with Selene Slava, who plays Gloria.
She was the chief friend of the show. Have you heard her interview? Go back and listen. Her interview was so great for this. Okay, good.
She's incredible. And so I just remember and that's where we met. Was doing this play, Basilica, at the Cherry Lane Theater. And she was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to miss some dates of rehearsal because we're gonna go on some like press tours for this like show. I don't know. It's like on the internet, so I don't know. And I'm like, what show? And she's like, it's called Orange is the New Black. And I'm like, I already knew that this was gonna be major. I'm like, your life is gonna change. And it did. The show closed and the next day was the premiere of season 1. So that it just, and I saw how everything collectively changed in the industry too.
Yes.
Regarding streaming and that model.
So, okay. So if you're willing to go there, the mental health, I think, is huge in what we do. And how do we not take ourselves out of the 4th season job by imploding on ourselves when we didn't get this thing that is now this megawatt out there? So I would love to know, going from, okay, now it's this mega hit, and then did you go in for 2nd season for multiple roles as well?
And for like recurring or guest spots. I went in for a couple guest spots. I went in every season. And then at the time,
what was the feedback you were getting? The feedback loop, was it just like, were you ever being pinned on a veil, or was it like, just great, thanks?
I was never in the room. I would get some adjustments or not, and it would always it's just a very warm room. If you're get to be in a room with Jen Houston and SJ, it's a very warm room. So I kind of course, I would walk out fucking deflated, because I'm like, what the fuck? Like, just there, it's inevitable to not admit that there is that sense of defeat. And yet still be a fan of the show, because that was not going to not happen. I was like, I'm still going to support and watch, because this is incredible.
Well, and I think part of the recovery process for not getting it and being called multiple times, some actors fall into the trope or trap of then pushing or being like, I'm not enough. So the next time they do the audition, they are almost auditioning themselves out of the opportunity, because their mental game is not in alignment with knowing at least my validation loop is being called back in constantly, right? Where sometimes we don't look at that as the validation loop. Sometimes they look at it as the rejection loop. Oh, I didn't get it again. I didn't get it again, versus I'm getting called in again. I'm getting called in again.
And, you know, in retrospect, and I'm being really, really honest, it really wasn't until the pandemic and how that really changed all of our lives. And I absolutely hit a wall where I said, it's either therapy or we're not going to get ahead of this. We are not going to be living in our purpose anymore. So it was, that really started in 2020, where now my relationship with auditioning is shifting, particular with film and TV, and my relationship with my manager, who's been crucial.
Well, I want to dive into that deep, but do you mind completing the orange? Because I want it.
Oh, yeah. I just remember being like, this is fucking amazing, because I don't have to put on makeup. I play like, the breakdown was just like, she's like kind of like the ringleader of like a new batch of bitches. And my first scene was with Piper, and so I already knew the tone of the show. And I just was like, this is fucking dope. I don't have to put on makeup. I remember it was summertime. I was like, I can walk out the train all hot and steamy and sweaty, and it's okay. I just
serving story, and I look like this person. Yep.
Yeah. At the time I was living with my parents, I was like, Buffy, I'm gonna wear one of your t-shirts. And I just put on sweats and a shirt, and I put my hair up in the most fucked up top knot, and just like frizzy and like balls to the wall. And I did the scene, and I was like, I was listening to Nicki Minaj. I'm crazy. I was listening to Nicki Minaj on the train, like trying to like get in the zone. And I just remember doing it and walking away feeling proud, not walking away thinking, oh, I booked this, but walking away saying, I owned the room. I understood the story. I understood the scene, this character. I was grounded. I was listening, and I was receiving, and then I was responding. And then I get the call like a week later. I was doing like teaching artist work, and I was trying to really figure out what that next paycheck was going to be. I was like babysitting on the side. It was a scary time. And I get the call that I booked it, and everything kind of shifted. This is when all of the imposter syndrome stuff comes up big time, because I'm like, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. They're gonna find out that like I don't belong in front of a camera, that I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm just a theater actress, that I'm only good in this kind of environment. And
Did
20
they hire you for one episode? Because I know you do 27 episodes straight, but again, this is good information for an actor to know. Were you hired as a guest star? Did you know it was going to be a reoccurring, especially on this show?
So yeah,
So many storylines. There's so much going on.
So many storylines, and I can't speak to production's process and how they navigate these contracts. But all it said was that I was just going to be a major recur, and I was literally I was in I was in the 27 consecutive episodes, and I would just get an avail check in the middle of shooting the first one. And I would get an avail check, and I would just hold on to those avail checks. Like, okay, I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here.
Well, this might be a theater's dream, because I think anybody else that I would be talking to that started in television and film, when you have to thread a character from week to week, when you don't know if you're going to be in from week to week, how you work as an actor, how much backstory to give yourself, what do you go from here to here? This is my motivation from this scene. And then you get next week's script and you're like, well, that's totally different. But for my theater background, ooh, Rosal, this serves you. Did it feel good week to week? Because you kind of, I would assume, have that background of like, oh, okay, I know how to build on this and build on this.
I'm a character. I hate that it's even called character acting. Why is it called that? I'll never know. We're playing characters.
We're all character actors, right?
But that is where I feel at home. That is where I'm like, ooh, I know who this person is. I'm like nothing like her, but I know who she is. And that is where my self-consciousness disappears, because that is where I feel strong. And that's why I had so much fun building. And I created such like beautiful relationships out of that show. And the high stakes of it was really, really intimidating. I'm not gonna lie. But
Go ahead.
I think for somebody who battles with low self-esteem, which is me, and I'm working on it very diligently now, but it's crazy how I guess because I had no other choice, it was like, you can't shit on yourself in this process. So if you're gonna talk badly to yourself, let's wait till you're out the van at home, see how you feel then. But you literally cannot afford to tell yourself that you don't know how to take direction, to tell yourself that you don't understand the technical terms. Like, you're picking it up on your feet.
And you're doing it in a world in which actually feels quite theater-like, I would assume, right? Even the way you guys were shooting it, that big of an ensemble cast, so many storylines going at the same time, leaving you so much room to build, you know, kind of where you want to go with this character. I'm wondering, to parlay it into the imposter syndrome, you know, Orange is the New Black, 27 episodes in a row, and then it goes away. You get that mountaintop, right? That I'm sure you got several times in theater as well, where it's like, I'm here. I'm at this place where I thought I couldn't even get to. Now I have to go and I have to do that cycle all over again.
That was really, really hard. I mean, so interestingly enough, and I guess, well, no, we can talk personal stuff too. I think that, which is why I'm grateful that I'm in the space that I'm in now, but around the time that ended, I had just started to be in a relationship. And that sort of became the distraction for me to not pour myself into my purpose and into my craft, and rather sort of like pour myself into this relationship, because that felt so much easier. So I was able to buffer a lot of the understandable feelings of pain or sadness or missing. So it wasn't until probably towards the end of that relationship where I started to then feel things and allow myself to feel it, and then the other side of that became like immense gratitude. And once I realized that this one relationship was kind of coming to an end, and immense hunger to fucking go balls to the wall and go out there. And that's what my next gig. But that next gig was 3 years after.
Well, and was that also the Power Book, the Raising Kanan? Did that happen, like you said, top of 2020? I'm gonna really get my shit together. Like, I'm gonna get my mental health right, because either I'm leaving the game or I'm staying in the game, and I'm going double down. So I would love to walk back through that point, because I've interviewed, like we were talking about it off mic, I've interviewed people that have been working for 50 years. I've interviewed people that have been working for 10 years. The imposter syndrome doesn't go away. That yearning doesn't go away. That am I ever going to work again doesn't seem to go away. So how do we recover or help ourselves sustain a creative career and not beat ourselves up, not then get to that mountaintop and be like, okay, now I have imposter syndrome, right? How do we allow ourselves to be mentally healthy so the characters, the story, our instrument can literally be of service and be in a grateful space of getting to do this?
I mean, that's such a beautiful conversation. That's what I really am learning so much about in therapy, is that there can be this sense, especially in our line of work, of like, it's all or nothing. Like, I'm either going to have all the jobs, and then when it's over, I'm going to have nothing. Like that kind of catastrophic thinking, versus the reality of life, which is there's going to be a little bit of all, there's going to be a little bit of nothing, and then there's going to be a little bit of all again. There's trust that there's going to be an ebb and flow. We might not know exactly when, but if this is that passion within you, what I try to focus on is, it's inevitable that I'm going to get something great again. I can't say that it's going to be tomorrow or like in two, but that's going to happen. Well, but show part of the gig, and there's a big sort of, for me, a history of isolating and shying away from community, shying away from showing up to see your friends play, or going to that reading, or committing to going to see that movie, or just being a part of community.
Community is so huge. I think being an actor can be such an isolating experience, not only isolating where you're at home doing the work by yourself, but then you can isolate yourself from thinking that there's a comparison and disparity, where it's like you said, let's use Salinas for an example. Salinas, she goes out, you guys kind of had the same story where you guys both use music. I love that you had Nicki Minaj. She had an idea of what her character was going to be through music. She's like, I think she likes salsa. I love that you're way into character, right? So you watch somebody rise, and then sometimes you start to think, well, if they're doing well, then I can't. That there's a limitation to your growth. So we can make ourselves really isolated in that way, by being like, well, she got it and I'm terrible, versus she got it. It's only a matter, it's getting closer. It's getting closer. It's getting closer. So with Power Book, when this come along, because you're in a better headspace, are you in a better headspace? And that's
sorry, let me reframe. Power came, it was actually at the very tail end of a relationship that this is where the heartbreak comes in, which I know anybody can relate to. A relationship that I was not supposed to be in anymore. So I was done a favor, but it ended, but I wasn't ready for it to end. That happened possibly a week after I booked Power. And then the pandemic, the first day of quarantine here in New York, was my first day of the fittings. And then my world just I ended up living back with my parents, because I was living with my then partner. The world is, I don't know, ending for all we know. We're banging on pots at 7:00. The show is on hold indefinitely. And that's where I was just like,
everything is out of your control. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? And then what is the grace and space that you're going to allow yourself to kind of be in the pain that you're in? And then how are we going to find support?
Ooh, yes.
And that is really where therapy came in, and relying really on my tribe of sisters and friends and artists. And I believe that that is what kept me afloat until November, which is when we picked back up for season 1.
Well, the long time between the audition and all that space and grace, like you said, you could have imploded on yourself. You could have done so many things. Taking this break from work, also theater is not happening at this moment. It's not like you're getting to work on a character. You get to work on yourself. Oh, lovely. Oh, lovely. Isn't that real? How does that change your approach to the work? Because then you go back in, and now we're getting right. The season 3 is coming out soon, so you've gotten to work on this character a few times, a few seasons. I'm coming from the bubble, coming from being birthed almost on stage to this healing point. What changed for the work with your approach to work?
I think a sense of trusting in my gifts and recognizing that I'm responsible for those gifts, that I owe it to myself to share those gifts, and that they're working for me. I don't have to work at it in this moment.
Ooh, that's already relieving, just even hearing that they're working for me. Yeah, and you have to work that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But speaking of the work, because you have layered upon layered upon layer of your 10,000 plus hours, we could be at 20,000 now, how do you approach work now, other than reading the script? And let's maybe even use power as an example, because it's getting ready to come up. How did you approach even either the audition or the idea of who this character was? And then how do you keep that freshness alive? Because that's another skill set that you've really worked on. And I think theater is going week to week with a character. So you're ready for television. You're other than the technical aspect that you had to learn so quickly, your skill set's designed for that. But when you get an audition or when you're working on a character like this, how do you first step in? Yeah, other than reading just the script.
That's a great question. I am very wary, especially as a Latina, in certain spaces. When I get a character, and this is like by default, I just naturally, no matter if she's nefarious, like no matter if she's a horrible human being or wonderful or whatever, I just try to get to the integrity of who this person is. What are these person's real circumstances? If she is a battered wife, in the case of my okay, there's a victimhood there, but she is in a scene talking to another woman about the power that she knows that she has. So she's not just a victim. She's not the wife of a bodega owner with a black eye and like mysterious. It's getting to the specificity of who this human being is. And then everything else can be interpreted as it will be. But I just try really hard, especially if something can be written. Not that this was written in that way, but I just try really, really hard to get to the integrity of the person.
I love that. And the layering, it's not just one thing. Like what we talked about at the beginning, characters that used to be representational of cultures or different communities were so one note, right? We're going to play at this one thing. And now being able to bring depth, even just to women, just general, us not being furniture pieces, and where do we fit, and having so much more complexity and nuances. I love that you even use the example of, yes, being a victim, being battered, but yet being strong and not believing that in yourself. Right there, we're in a push and pull. We're in a conflict within ourselves. That's interesting. I want to learn. I'm going to lean in and watch versus you playing at that idea. And
absolutely. That's just more gratifying, ultimately, when that's like the approach.
Oh, I can't wait to see this. I can't wait to see the third season when it comes out. How much time do we have before it's summer? But did they give a date yet? Because then, well, since we're all going to be at home for the writer's strike, this is the time. Yep.
It'll be out in the summertime. But I think Also, I think this last experience that I had on Broadway, which I think it's one of the most gratifying artistic experiences I've ever had. And I think all of us that shared in that space can agree on that. But I think that there was just there was a shift in me, definitely, um, in realizing that for so many years I run away from who I am, because what I am is too much or not enough. What I am might make a situation uncomfortable or might not make any impact. What these are the thoughts, and this shared experience with this group of people on stage every night, and the connections that we formed, and the communal experience that we had with the audiences, I have felt the most in my full being as a human being and as an artist. And those moments can be very fleeting. So I'm just very cognizant about continuing to say it, because I want to hold on to that. And I want that for us as artists, especially as women in this world.
I think that's once you've been working for a long time too, right? That's what we chase. Chase is that feeling of community, that feeling of connectivity, that feeling of balancing the polarities. Like you just said, in the human being, you just described the polarities of holding both of those things also in theater. And I don't think there's a better profession to choose to really look at the spiritual aspects of being a human and,
Yeah.
and having all of those things equal, that we're not perfect, that we have these disparities, or that we have these insecurities. Am I enough? Am I not enough? I think every actor probably falls in that category of like, I need to do more, and then just trust. My instrument is so enough that this story can come through. I think that's the first 10 years. That's why I don't interview anybody unless they have at least 10 years experience, because you haven't dealt with that. Am I enough? Am I not enough? In the valleys that we go through after having these peak highs. It's one thing to get a job and really ride that job. It's another thing to sustain a career as a creative person. And
And I just wanted to share briefly too, because it's just in line with that. The lead of our play, the great Stephen McKinley Henderson, you must, I mean, just he is, I don't have enough words to describe what a legend this man is. But he just has so many wise sayings. And I remember in one of our pre-show circles, where anybody who was moved would say an intention or a prayer or whatever it may be. And there had just, I guess there's so much pressure around the show. Once it opened, it got rave reviews, packed houses, and I guess to just bring the noise down, we all held hands and he said, just remember, the craft is first and the career will come. And it's in those valleys that I then am like, it's the craft right now. That's what we're gonna source. It's your creativity. That's what's going to be the power.
And don't you feel like those valleys make you buoyant for that creativity? Like you wouldn't be able to pull from anything if we sustained this high level career all the time. I was trying to explain this to my daughter. Julia Roberts and I work the same amount. She just has a bigger payday, so there's different. So when I look at the disparity of what I'm comparing myself to, am I really looking at the totality of my experience in the craft, or am I comparing it to the sustainability or success of somebody at a place where they're monetarily making a certain amount? Because even at that level, it's still the valleys that make you buoyant. Jennifer Lawrence now fired her agents because she wasn't getting all of the opportunities that she wanted. She wasn't getting to see all the scripts that were coming in. She's gone back to the craft, because once you get to the height of everybody knowing you, then the microscope's on you in a different way, and that imposter syndrome comes around. So if you're not able to look at your why and hit a few valleys to see where you can really distill through why you're doing this, what you're doing it for,
I love that. That's exactly it. And I think, um, in line with like this imposter syndrome thing is now I'm learning, like when I really when I dare to be honest with myself and I dare to not edit myself in the answering of the question, what do you really want? What is your dream? I've noticed for years, I'll edit the answer before it can even come out of my mouth, just to myself, or before I even put pen to paper. And then that's going to have a ripple effect in terms of how the energy moves in your favor or not. But I think in the being honest with myself about the big dream, then the next component is like the action steps to get there, then empower you.
Yeah.
Because you're
I would love to end on what's the big dream? If you've ever been able to unedit the version and say it out loud. As a creative person who was literally birthed into a theater bubble to rise to where you are right now with the knowledge that you've had as a creative being who's responsible for telling beautiful stories, who's gotten the privilege to be responsible for carrying great characters all the way through. What is the goal for you? Because everybody, it is different. And getting to that honesty point, then I think magnetizes that to you so fast. If you'd be willing to share.
absolutely. And that's that's a big one. There's so many, but what I want to be able to share the human experience at its most honest, nuanced, complex, profound, hilarious, real way on stage, on camera, on film, in a big way where we, in particular, where I am a part of a movement of Latinx representation, not just being the exception, but the rule, so that when we see stories on screen, it is reflective of the vast spectrum of the human experience, which encompasses all different body types, all different shades, all different the different human beings that embody this earth and this experience. And I want to be able to reflect that in a real way and with massive longevity.
Oh, so thank you, Rosal.
You.
You did. And I truly believe in the connectivity of the ethers, and where two or more are gathered. If you're able to say it and say it in the way in which you just said it, that would be your blessing for all of us to be able to see you do that and continue to see you do that, because you've been doing it. So thank you for coming and being so open about your whole process and just diving into those places that sometimes maybe don't feel so great, but will help anybody that's listening right now that is maybe in that place seek either the therapy or the understanding, or being more specific with their why, or understanding how to bring characters that maybe they're not seeing of themselves into the forefront. So thank you. My gosh, I really needed this right now too. So thank you.
Oh, I really needed this too. I didn't wear waterproof mascara, so I can't. This was really, really beautiful. And I'm so grateful for you to have me on. I was very much meant to be. I'm honored.
I'm so honored to have you. Thank you. Where can everybody follow along with you? And as soon as you see the show date, you just summer. All you've been told is summer.
All I know for now is summer. But my Instagram, which is where I'm most active, Rosal Margarita. That's my middle name, and it stands for the flower, not for the drink. But I did the margarita too. But in my case, margarita is Daisy in Spanish. So Rosal Margarita on Instagram.
I love it. Thank you.